Hello everyone and welcome to my talk on machine translation in video game localization from English into Slovak, subtitled Where are the limits, if there are any at all. First of all, let's take a quick look at the gaming industry, which is at the moment one of the fastest growing industries in the whole world, according to Statista. And machine translation is inevitably connected with speed as well. And not only developers think that machine translation can speed up time to production. In other words, if a video game can be machine translated and then just post-edited, the game can get out sooner, it can be played sooner, and various kinds of benefits come in sooner as well. Let's test this assumption. Let's take a look at two different samples from two video games. One of them is Javascript Racer, which is a freeware video game you can download at any time and you can play it in your web browser. I machine translated the video game from English into Slovak. I used Google Translate for its fast availability. And this video game can be post-edited after it gets machine translated through Google Translate. The machine translation output is quite good and usable. It would need some post-editing here and there, or some translation, like camera height is not translated at all in segment 15. But other than that, it's usable and it would speed up the whole localization process. On the other hand, let's look at this sample from Minecraft. It's just one quick segment, but I think that this segment speaks for itself. The whole text is really creative. It reflects current cultural phenomena. And the machine translation, again, I used Google Translate for consistency's sake. The machine translation isn't useful at all. The segment or the translation can't be even post-edited. It would have to be translated from scratch, which means that the localization process would kind of lose out time, since the localizer would have to first think whether it's even post-editable, and once he concludes that it's not post-editable, he would have to translate from scratch. Which looks like just a few seconds, but when it piles up, it can count to hours and maybe even days. So from these two examples, from JavaScript Racer and Minecraft, we could easily conclude that there are two types of texts in video games. The first type, as we have seen from JavaScript Racer, are software texts, which are basic UI options, settings, basically texts that repeat themselves, not only throughout one video game, but throughout several or probably even most of the video games that are out there. Those are texts like open, save game, load game, continue, difficulty, resolution settings, and so on and so on. And then on the other hand, there are creative texts. Those are dialogues, place descriptions, additional information or item descriptions, and so on and so on. And these contain a creative element inside of them, like the text in Minecraft. And it could be difficult to machine translate and post-edit these texts, as the machine translation output might not be good enough for post-editing, and the localizers would just lose out time when they try to read the machine translation output, make sense of it, and decide to just translate from scratch. I also did another kind of counting. I had a sample of Minecraft text, which were together 40,058 words, divided in 8,418 segments. And by hand I counted that approximately 30% of the whole sample were so-called software text, which is 12,617 words. And this is like a week's work if we were to translate them from scratch. But as we have shown, software texts are easily machine translated and post-edited. So in this case, post-editing and machine translation could speed up the localization process, and it could be helpful since these texts are often repeatable and machine translation might actually give good results. But then I thought, are these 30% relevant in a global sense? And I don't think they are, since there are different kinds of video games, different genres, which means that there are different numbers as well, different lengths, different amounts of words of text. So there isn't a way to somehow take a global percentage of a video game and just post-edit that and translate from scratch the rest, because different games have different number of words, different contexts behind them, which means that machine translation doesn't need to be a bad thing at all. It could be helpful, but what's the problem behind this? The problem is that people behind machine translation, or maybe even developers who aren't well versed in machine translation, think that anything can be machine translated, which isn't true, as we have already shown. They also think that software texts containing variables could be machine translated, which again isn't quite true. As for the example, you defeated name, a variable, couldn't be machine translated and post-edited later, because, for example, Slovak, while translating into Slovak, the sentence would have to contain a descriptor, because the name would have to be conjugated, which can't be done by machine translation. So that's also kind of a limit. And the problem is also that machine translation is often just an afterthought, just like whole localization process. When the whole development of the video game is finished, they come up with the idea to localize it into various languages, especially with indie games, where the first kind of focus is on the development process, and afterwards they come to the realization that they could localize the game to different languages. And in order to speed up the localization, they use machine translation, which isn't as effective as they think it is. So what's the solution to this problem? The solution is that the thoughts or thinking on machine translation should start already at the internationalization phase, not after the development is complete, but even before it starts. The text contained in a video game should be treated carefully. They could be divided into the two groups, as I have already shown. But that would mean that the development team would have to consult the localization team, maybe even quite often. And those two teams tend to work in different environments and in different ways, so the communication between them tends to not be as good as it could be in order to provide good localization. So as a result, trust is key, and I believe that developers should trust their localizers and localization teams. And they should consult, especially because a localizer or a translator, for that sake, can see after some experience that this text can be machine translated. Okay, let's speed it up there, but this other text cannot be machine translated, so this would have to be translated from scratch. And the developers should trust that the localizers or the translators can do their job, and that they can do their job well. And that's all. Thank you for your attention.